Today, we're going to shoot out 4 mid-priced guitar amp modelers.
Wow!
What's up everybody, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Taylor, and I do all sorts of guitar related stuff like this. On my channel. If that's something you enjoy, make sure to subscribe and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss any of my uploads. If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you have undoubtedly seen all of these guitar effects processors on my channel. And so today what I wanted to do is compare the 4 that I have in my possession that are right around the $500 mark. We'll be comparing the Hotone Ampero, the Mooer GE250, the 𝘆𝐶𝑖𝑂''𝗋𝗋 Go, and the 𝘆𝐶𝑖𝑂''𝗋𝗋 HX STOMP. The way that I'm going to do this video is I'm going to go over each of the different modelers, talk about some of the features that they have, talk about the pros and cons, the things that I like about them, and then at the end of the video, we'll shoot them out in a mix both with the stock cab impulse responses as well as a third-party impulse response. And if you simply must digest those riffs right now, there is a timestamp table of contents below as well as chapters in the scroll bar of the YouTube video. So there you go, but make sure you come back to this part because there's some important details on these modelers you might not want to miss. Really quick before I get into this video, I just want to mention that if you like my videos and you want to help me continue to make them, there is a support section in the description below. There's all sorts of stuff down there, like links to my Patreon, links to my band's merch, and affiliate links and stuff like that. So if you like this channel, it'd mean a lot to me if you could go down there and check that out. Okay, with that being said, let's take a look at these modelers. First up, and the most inexpensive of the bunch, is the Hotone Ampero. Now both the Hotone Ampero and the GE250 fluctuate in price quite a bit, and right now at the time of filming this video, you can get a Hotone Ampero for $430. Now, even though the Hotone Ampero is the least expensive on this list, it still has a ton of really cool features. You have multiple input modes, so you have line, acoustic guitar, and electric guitar. You have a balanced left and right output, a ground lift, an auxiliary in, a headphone output, both left and right unbalanced 1/4 inch outputs. You also have MIDI in and a second expression pedal slot if you want to expand your Ampero. The Ampero is also the only one of these units that has any sort of modern technology with a touchscreen included. Now, some of the things that I really like about the Ampero is I think it has a really good amp selection, and I think all of the amps sound really good. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, I think that this has the most fidelity in the high end out of any of the amp modelers that are listed today. It also has a ton of really great and unique effects included with it. Now, some of the things that I don't like about the Ampero. I really wish that the Ampero had a global EQ. While the amp models do sound excellent, they're almost like snapshots of the amplifier that they're modeling, and the tone controls don't allow you to sculpt the tone as much as they do on the other modelers. But again, this thing is really awesome, and for $430, I don't think you can go wrong with it. Next, we have the GE250. At the time of filming this video, you can get a GE250 for right around $445. Now, the GE250 is a step up from the Ampero in a lot of ways, and it has a lot of really good features in it. Just like the Ampero, it has a second expression port if you want to add an expression pedal. It also has an auxiliary in, balanced left and right XLR outputs with a ground lift, unbalanced left and right 1/4 inch outputs, a MIDI port that can both be used for MIDI in as well as MIDI out, a headphones output, and as well as all of those ins and outs, it also has an effects loop. Now, what the effects loop does is really increases the amount of ways that you could use the GE250, especially if you want to use it with your own amplifier. You can do that using the 4-cable method. Some of the things that I really like about the GE250 are it has a separate volume control for the XLR outputs, which can really come in handy if you're using it live, especially if you're using a more complex cable routing method. The GE250 has global EQ as well, which is really nice, especially if you're using it with a power amp and a cabinet. You can dial in sort of the sound of the power amp and cabinet without having to change your individual presets. And 2 of the things that are really unique to the GE250 out of all of the other modelers, which I think are really cool. Number 1, it has a tone capture feature. So what you can do is you can take the GE250, hook it up with the 4-cable method in conjunction with your amplifier, dial in a sound that sounds, sort of close to the amplifier that you're trying to capture, and then you can use the tone capture feature to match the amplifier in the GE250 to your actual amplifier. And in my experiments with this, it works pretty good, and you can get really close to your actual amplifier sound. So that's really cool, especially if you have like a tube amp that is just your baby and you do not want to take it out of your home and risk it getting damaged. You can tone capture with the GE250, and then essentially you have that tone inside the GE250, and then you can just take this guy to, the studio or your practice space or wherever you'd like to recreate that tone. The other really awesome thing about the GE250 is it gives you access to the Mooer GNR amp files. Now, what the GNR amp files are is they're essentially amplifiers that have been captured using the GE Lab software for iOS devices. So what happens is someone downloads the GE Lab software on their iOS device, and they capture whatever amplifier or piece of gear using the GE Lab's tone capture software, and then they upload it to the GE Lab's cloud in GNR file format. You can then load those files onto your GE250 as new amplifiers. And one of the reasons that this is really cool is you can get access to amplifier tones that you might not have any other way to get access to. Now here's some of the things that I don't like about the GE250. Although the GNR files are a really great idea and really cool in theory, you're really at the mercy of whoever captured that tone, and if they didn't do a good job, it's just not going to sound very good. So the quality control is kind of all over the place with the GNR files. I also find the amplifier models in the GE250 to be similar to the Ampero in the way that they just sound like snapshots, and the tone sculpting controls don't really affect the tone in the way that they would on a real amplifier. And another thing you really notice about the tones that you get with the GE250 when you're using it is they almost sound pre-processed. They're very rich in the midsection, but they kind of lack some of that high-end fidelity that you hear in the Ampero. Okay, next up is the Pod Go. And as you can see, the Pod Go is the largest of all the units on this list. It is definitely meant for the stage. And in my opinion, this is one of the coolest things about it is really a floor unit that is meant to be used live. As far as the input and output options, it has the least out of all of the modelers on this list. It has a guitar in, it has a second expression foot switch if you want to hook up another expression pedal. It has a stereo effects loop, but they're balanced 1/4 inch cables, meaning that you have to use some sort of splitter or TRS cable to be able to use the effects loop in stereo. And the two main outputs, even though they're balanced, are 1/4 inch, they're not XLR. So if you want to be able to use them balanced, you need to be able to use a TRS cable and send them to something that accepts a TRS input. It also has a 1/4 inch amp output and a 1/4 inch headphone output. Now, even though the connectivity is not where the Pod Go exceeds, it does do a lot of things really well. Like I said before, the form factor is a really big deal here, and if I was going to take any of these units on stage with me, I would definitely take the Pod Go. In my opinion, out of the Pod Go, the Ampero, and the GE250, which are the units that have expression pedals on them in this video, I think the Pod Go is the only one that actually has a usable expression pedal. I'm not a big fan of the smaller expression pedals on the other units, and to be honest with you, I would really prefer that they just either put those manufacturing costs into other features, or just took that cost off of the overall product and made them a little bit cheaper. The Pod Go also features the Helix amp modeling technology, meaning that this is the cheapest entry point. The user interface on all of these devices is all pretty simple and user-friendly, which is a big deal to me, but I find it the easiest on the Pod Go. Now, some of the things that I don't like about the Pod Go. The Pod Go is really limited in some ways, not only if you want to use like MIDI switching, for example, but also in your effects chain. Similar to the Ampero and the GE250, you have predetermined blocks like amp and cabinet and wah, and you also have a limited amount of blocks, meaning if you like to build these really big, complex patches that you would be able to build on something like the Helix, you're not really going to be able to do that. Now, if you're more of a meat and potatoes signal chain sort of guy, you know, just using a drive and like a reverb and a delay in your amp and your cabinet, then this will suit your purposes just fine. But if you like to stack crazy amounts of effects and make super complicated chains, then you might find some limitation here. Another thing that you might consider a negative with the Pod Go is the cabinet selection and sounds really aren't that great. This is something Line 6 has been criticized about for a long time, and they just recently, with the Helix line of products, allowed you to start adding your own impulse responses, which I think is a really big step up and eliminates a lot of the criticism with the cabinets that they've had in the past. However, if you're one of those people who just expects the built-in cabinets to sound amazing as soon as you plug them in, you might have to do a little bit of work with this one to get them to sound the way you want. Okay, moving on. Lastly, we have the HX STOMP. At the time of shooting this video, the HX STOMP comes in at $599 US, and it is the smallest form factor out of any of the modelers in this video. Okay, so the HX STOMP is very similar to the Pod Go in some ways, and very different from the Pod Go in other ways. In terms of connectivity, you have a stereo TRS send, you have 1/4 inch left and right return auxiliary ins, you have a 1/4 inch expression input if you wanted to add an expression pedal to this unit, you have a left and a right 1/4 inch input, and then you have a left and a right output. Again, if you are using TRS cables, you can run those balanced. You also have a MIDI input, a MIDI output that can also be used to run MIDI through the unit, and a 1/4 inch headphones output. Now, even though this is the smallest form factor of all of the units, I think that it has the most functionality in a lot of ways just because of the connectivity with this. And although this wouldn't be my choice if I was going to grab a modeler to play live with, this would be my choice if I was going to put it in my rack and use MIDI switching. And I really do think the form factor is actually a plus with this thing because it's so small. I mean, you can fit it in a gig bag, no problem. It has the same helix modeling technology and the same amps and effects as the Pod Go, but where this has the edge on the Pod Go is that the software is more similar to the Helix than it is towards the Pod Go. The Pod Go software is a little bit more fixed and linear and doesn't allow you to have as much control over the routing and the chains that you're building, whereas with the HX STOMP you have 6 blocks and you can really assign anything you want to those blocks. So if you want to run dual amps in stereo, or you want to build like crazy effects chains with 6 delays, you can do that. And as far as the negatives, I would say that the negatives are pretty much the same as the Pod Go. The cabs are probably going to take a little bit of work to get them to sound the way that you want them to, but all in all, this is a really great unit, especially if you need something really small that you can just throw in your gig bag and take with you. Okay, so now that you've seen all the modelers, I want to shoot them out in a mix. And in this mix, I chose to shoot out an absolutely classic amp model that all of these amp modelers have, the Mesa Dual Rectifier. Now, in pretty much any application I'm using a Mesa Dual Rectifier, I would almost always boost it. However, I didn't want to use any built-in tube screamers or anything in each of these modelers. I just wanted to compare the modeling of the dual rectifier and the matching cabinets, so to boost each one of the models, I used an actual Fortin grind. We're going to listen to them in a mix both with the stock cab IRs as well as third-party IRs to take the cabinet out of the equation. All right, let's get to the shootout. Alright guys, which one of these do you think recreates the dual rectifier the best? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, thank you so much to my patrons, and if you're interested in helping out the channel and helping me to make more videos like this, hit up my Patreon via a link in the description below. And as always, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.